Oneg Shabbats possible for our congregation. And so now I want to share a few words of Torah for you. But before I do, I want to talk briefly about internet advertising. Because by now I know that all of us are well acquainted with this phenomenon that we encounter every time we go online, all of the advertisements that confront us, and all of us have been the victims or beneficiaries of targeted advertising when the websites that we visit deliver us ads that their algorithms have determined are especially relevant to our interests or our behaviors or our purchasing patterns. So I will share with you that I first noticed about a month ago that the ads that were showing up in my Facebook feed had begun to change, slowly at first and then with growing frequency. I was being served up ad listings for flowers and candy. Soon the ads grew to include women's jewelry and stuffed animals. And when I began receiving ads for overnight tropical getaways and lingerie, it finally dawned on me that Valentine's Day was almost here. Now, what was interesting is that I could tell right from the start that not only did the advertisers certainly know that I'm married, but they certainly know that I'm hopeless and incompetent at being married, because as time went on, they began pushing me more and more ads for specialized services of overnight rush delivery Valentine's Day gifts. And if you read between the lines, you can hear the advertisers pleading with you. We know you're hopeless. We know you forgot. For God's sake, just get her something, please. So I'm not going to spend all of my time tonight talking to you about what a goofball I am or what an incompetent husband I am, but we are going to talk a little bit about Torah in a moment. But I share this with you because of the following connection. This week, we read together the portion of the Torah that's called Truma, which for some reason, without fail, every year falls very close to Valentine's Day. And I always remember that it's coming because of the opening line of this Torah portion, which goes like this. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the children of Israel, bring me gifts." Again with the gifts. But if you think about this great connection that we are offered here between our Jewish calendar and the secular tradition at this time of year about giving presents to the ones you love, not just in internet ads, but in our holy Torah as well, the message comes back loud and clear. If you want to tell someone you love them, you have to show them you love them by getting them a gift. And once again, those of us who are terrible gift givers are out of luck. Now, it's not just that the Torah portion talks about gift giving that makes it such a nice fit for Valentine's Day every year. What's important is that the Torah wants to make sure that in our relationships, whether they're with our romantic partners or with God, what we get right is the proper motivation, the reason that ought to lie behind why we give gifts, as a sign of our attachment and our affection for the other. There's a suggestion in the rabbinic commentaries on this portion that it arrives at precisely this spot in the Torah's narrative as a way of offering to us a subtle point of connection to the story of the golden calf. According to this theory, God has picked this moment to send Moses on a mission to collect Valentines from the Israelites, because it's just now that the Israelites have begun contemplating infidelity. They've begun for the first time to question their monogamous commitment to God. They've just started to entertain the possibility of straying from their partnership. For the first time, the Israelites may be willing to cheat on God, so to speak, and their flirtation leads them to build the golden calf. And Moses knows about the people's infidelity, and it enrages him. So God tells him, Moses, you go tell them to bring me presents. I need you to help me teach them about what it means to be faithful and committed and monogamous. And you may find, Moses, that their hearts aren't quite ready to comply, that they're not quite ready to settle down in an exclusive relationship with me. But if we can't yet direct their hearts, we'll start by shaping their behavior. Teach them, Moses, to bring gifts to the one they love. And they'll find that if they perform that behavior of love often enough and faithfully enough, that their hearts will soon follow. So when we turn back to the words of the Torah, we find indeed that that is the very next instruction that God gives Moses. Tell the Israelites to bring me gifts, and take those gifts from those who are moved by their hearts. Now, of course, we already know that when it comes to our human romantic relationships, gifts alone can't make a relationship succeed. And as it turns out, the same lesson applies when we consider the bonds of spiritual relationship that we hope to receive and eventually give back to God. Affection can't be bought, but the impulse to give is a beautiful and powerful symbol of one's connection to another soul. And so God continues to give direction to Moses about collecting gifts from the Israelites, which we learn will be used to build the tabernacle, a portable wilderness sanctuary in which the people will worship God. Moses will use the people's Valentines to build a space for worship. And at the end, after all of the details and the particulars of God's instruction, God's words to Moses conclude this way: V'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell within you. And we're invited to note that God's instruction isn't that we should build a sanctuary so that God can dwell in it. Build me a sanctuary, God says, and I will dwell in you. And that's what love looks like, isn't it? That's what the gifts of love feel like when we give them willingly and selflessly. Clearing a space in your heart and inviting the one you love to come in and move in and dwell there. Honoring your partner's vulnerability that allowed them to invite you in the first place, and saying back to them, yes, I will dwell within you. Now, I know that Friday night is Shabbat, and when we're here together in a synagogue, it's not really the ideal place to deliver a sermon about Valentine's Day. Obviously, Valentine's Day isn't a Jewish holiday, and maybe more importantly, it's already clear that I'm not very good at Valentine's Day. But on this Shabbat, on this anniversary of Shabbat Truma, the Sabbath of the people's giving of gifts, I can't get away from the fact that our Torah has delivered us again and again the message not that gift giving is unnecessary. In fact, the opposite, that we are supposed to give gifts to the people we care about as a symbol of relationship and commitment and connection, and as a tool to help both giver and receiver draw closer to one another. But the Torah is at pains to remind us, if we end there, if the gift itself is beginning and end of the transaction, we will have failed to fulfill God's hope for us. Instead, the gift is merely overture and invitation to continue drawing ever closer, so close indeed that at the end we end up inside the other's heart. God's promise to the Israelites that he will dwell inside them is a beautiful, intimate, and loving promise. And it reminds us that when we open our hearts and make ourselves able to love and to give, it is an act of holiness, a gesture of sacred commitment with which we make God's presence manifest in our community. To be faithful Jews, to be good spiritual beings, we first must learn what love means. And once we learn that, we can continue to give and receive and dwell inside each other with a loving generosity without end. So I wish you all a weekend of love, of gifts given and received, and may we all live happily ever after. Shabbat Shalom.